Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Reality Radio. I am your host, David Rich, here to ask all the questions that you deserve answers to. Keep everybody updated and informed on the important things going on in the world today. All right, so since I last was on the air, last Tuesday, of course we had a riotous situation happened in the Capitol, and it was been absolutely preoccupying and to a certain extent devastating to this country and the going forwards. And we're going to see what happens next if Trump will be impeached or whatever. See what Congress does, see what Biden does when he takes over. I will hold my opinion for later because I'm sure Paul Dewar and I are going to talk about that at some point. So I will wait. Let's see here. Okay, so yeah, I got Paul Dewar coming on today. Very interesting topic for sure. It's called New Illinois, and it's a nonprofit organization, literally, like they're legally established. And its goal is to break Illinois up, secede, basically, for certain areas to secede from Illinois as it stands now, and create a set of smaller states that would govern themselves. Now, I saw the map, and I'm going to go ahead and not try to talk too much about it because, Paul, I don't want to get anything wrong. Paul obviously knows a lot more about this than I do. But it's just, if I remember, there was like 4 or 5 different areas that would be their own states according to their mission. Northern Illinois being one, Southern Illinois being another, and then there were some other divisions in the middle there, and due to political economic alignments, socio-political economic alignments, and just day ins and day outs, meaning, and again, Paul will elaborate on this. He's got the full 2 hours, so he said he wanted 2 hours. I gave it to him. He said he could talk about this all day. I'm like, okay. So, but the idea basically is that, and I remember when I lived in Portland, Oregon, excuse me, 2004 to 2015, 2016 pretty much. Portland is, as everybody knows, extremely blue. Just about every city in this country, if not every major city in this country, goes blue. Urban areas are far more diverse. There's a greater pluralistic temperament going on there, disposition going on there. A lot of different cultures involved in one area. So it's a lot more progressive, excuse me, socially, and therefore politically and economically. In certain ways. Now, I shouldn't say economically, because they also tend to be the ones that cost the most, and therefore there's massive areas of poverty, and that's not progressive. But you know what I'm saying. Culturally and socially are the main areas. So they tend to vote blue. Well, outside of major cities, most areas, especially rural areas, tend to very vastly go red, Republican. Well, when you have one given political border around a massive area that incorporates both of these urban areas and rural areas by definition are less populated than urban areas. And, elections as they go, and as well as they should, they go by population. The most amount of people that votes for X wins. Okay, well, if you have one area that is constantly population-wise absolutely dominating a massive amount of area, landmass, that includes enough other people that would be politically otherwise if they were left to their own wiles, something bad happens there to them, to the ones who just get overwhelmed politically by the people in one given city. And so when I'm living in Portland, Oregon, I remember thinking that because Portland, Oregon's such a beautiful state, I spent a lot of time outside of Portland, going to the coast, going to, down south into different areas, Bend and so on, Eugene, and driving over Corvallis, driving all around. And a lot of these areas, you can just tell by the political signs all over the place. Walking into a bar and seeing Fox News on instead of CNN, you could definitely easily tell that a lot of these places were Republican, were red. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, well, that sucks for them. That's not fair. That they just get completely marginalized because they don't have the dominant population. Okay. Anyway, that's the gist of what's going on. And that is why Mr. Durr will be on the show briefly here. But I also wanted to, before I call Paul, say that sentence, I want to read something that has been floating around the internet. I'm sorry, floating around Facebook. But it is worth stating, because this is also something that I brought up, that I've thought myself many, many times. In fact, I've said this on my show in not so many words many times before, but I want to read this real quick. Clarifying, in case anyone you know is confused, a helpful rule of thumb I borrowed from a friend. Huge numbers of our population believe in a complete alternate reality, alternate facts, as it were. But just as intensely as I believe they are deluded, they think I am the one who is deluded. Maybe I am. So how can I be confident in my perception? It can be quite difficult, for sure. But I have found that in times of political confusion, particularly when emotions are running high and creating tunnel vision, the presence of Nazis can be an extremely helpful indicator. If I am attending a local demonstration or event and I see Nazis, neo-Nazis, casual Nazis, master race Nazis, or the latest whatever uber mythology Nazis, I figure out which side they're on. And if they are on my side of the demonstration, I am on the wrong side. It is tough to argue moral equivalence when I am standing next to a Nazi. Look to my right. Is there a guy wearing a 6 million wasn't enough t-shirt? I am on the wrong side. Look to my left. If that guy is wearing a Camp Auschwitz t-shirt, I am on the wrong side. Are speakers being applauded for referring to things that Hitler got right? Probably the wrong side. Team spirit, face paint, and hat with animal horns? This is actually an unclear indicator that could mean anything, but safest to keep my distance from that guy anyway, even at a football game. However, I can always rely on the presence of Nazis as a guiding light through a fog of disinformation. Some things are relative, and politics can absolutely have its opposing sides and gray areas. But evil and good are absolute, as are the lessons of history. So just look for the Nazis and make your own decisions. All right, well, whoever posted that first, bravo to you. You're an amazing human being, and I love you. All right, something to consider. That is something I said before. I said that to my former co-host, Karen. I'm like, Karen, she's going all right-wing. I'm like, look who you're aligning yourself with. You don't see problems. You like Trump, well, so do neo-Nazis and white supremacists. And that has to speak tomes about him. Anyway, she's gone. Let's call Paul, shall we? Mr. Paul, sir, this is David Rich on Reality Radio. You're live on the air. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Glad to hear from you.
You as well, sir. You as well. So actually, it's just a little backstory, everybody. I actually had Paul on one of my side project podcasts several months ago. God, I don't even remember which one was it. Was it property rights? What was it? Do you remember?
Not specifically.
Okay.
A couple of different topics, actually.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so I clearly left a lasting impression on both of us. Anyway, how you doing? How are things? Let's get small talk out of it.
Everything's great. Just sitting here following along news with all the world's chaos like everybody else, wondering what happens next.
Yeah, it's definitely a nail-biter of a time to be in, for sure.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So we've allocated to you the entire 2 hours of the show because you said you could easily talk about this all day. Now, I'm assuming we're going to go on to other subjects as well. But the main topic, as I promoted and announced a moment ago, it's called New Illinois. And that's just the name for the formalized nonprofit organization. But the mission itself, the movement itself, the underpinning of it, the impetus, if you will, is basically a secession of certain areas from the state of Illinois to become their own states, correct?
Correct, and it's a voluntary thing by county, who wants to go, who wants to stay type thing. We're hoping that all 101 outside of Cook would want to be involved in this. other areas in order to achieve, a complete and equal balance between the two. For say, just for an example's sake, if the entire Collar County decided to stick with, Cook County, it'd be a detrimental economical impact to the rest of the counties that decided to, remove themselves and create the 51st state because of all the industry, business, trade, and monopoly of the, revenue is from that general area, especially the Collar counties where it is, makes up the majority of the revenue for the state.
Okay, well, that's an interesting point, and something we should probably talk about is the economic implications of these sorts of things. Now, county to county trafficking of, or I should say, movement or trafficking of goods and services is a lot easier to contend with than, say, state to state or country to country, correct?
It can be. It depends on how you look at it. Let's take
an
example for Illinois. If you look at the revenue generation from the Legislative Research Unit of Illinois, is basically a revenue expenditure data analysis of every single 102 counties in Illinois. Okay. All of the counties that surround other states that have interstate travel or interstate trade amongst the two states has the most revenue generating. That way, people don't mind going across because of the high taxes, the high costs, everything. There is anybody that has the ability to drive within half an hour, 45 minutes to cross a river or across a state line in order to get a cheaper gas price or cheaper groceries or cheaper anything, even if it's nicotine, alcohol, or whatever. It shows that it's also goes the other way, that other states tend to want to come here for the lower costs of anything that they can get at a lower cost. And I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but according to the revenue generator and the expenditures, all of the counties that are outlying areas of the state that border other states tend to do the best, except for your southern region. And mostly what I found through that is typically because of the regulations and restrictions through Shawnee Forest and everything like that. Okay. It's mostly a national forest and restricted from any kind of production. They have so many EPA regulations and restrictions, you can't really put an industry down there. Right. So the amount of growth that you can actually produce out of the southern Illinois area is limited due to the restrictions and restraints that anybody could do. Plus, because they don't want you to start clearing a national forest. Right.
Okay, and that's a good, interesting point. When I lived in Portland, Oregon, so it's it's like you cross over the bridge and you're in Washington. Okay, Washington had sales tax, Oregon did not. So a lot of people from Washington, like I can't remember the name of this town now, but anyway, would cross over the bridge to go shopping, grocery shopping, furniture shopping, whatever shopping, in Oregon, or Portland specifically. And it used to really annoy Portlanders to no end because they were getting an advantage that most people had to make up for in other areas of their taxes, like property taxes and stuff like that. Just because the state wasn't getting it specifically from sales tax does not mean that the grubby little hands wasn't getting it elsewhere. So I understand what you're saying about people coming over and taking advantage of different cheaper prices or what advantages in other areas. But my point is not like more state to state. I mean, yes, you're right, because it's state to state at some point. It includes county to county as well. I get that. But let's say Kane County and Will County. Do they have a lot of differences in taxation or just sales of goods and services that the distinguishing between the two legally as political boundaries would create any sort of conflict?
The only distinguishable difference through this report is it doesn't break it down by the county standards. The most important thing that you have to remember through this report is any differences could be very well state regulated facilities. So let's say, Will County holds a state prison, but Kane County doesn't. Will County is going to show a high expenditure towards state-run facilities. So it's really hard to do it without a proper county-by-county audit.
Right. Super analysis,
balanced budget per county and their municipalities. It's really hard to get an actual guesstimate of what the allocations are going for. But by doing the year's end revenues balance based on balances through the counties at the year end, it comes down to a simple in and out. So whenever you look at this report, you really don't get an analysis of what their expenditures and revenues are to generate this number, but it's just an overall number averaged out of in and out.
No, I got you. Yeah, no, that would take considerable analysis to get that detail.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. So also, I mentioned before, when I lived in Portland, Oregon, Portland being a city, a small but major city, and just about every city in this country goes blue. I mean, I can't think of one that doesn't. They might be out there somewhere, but because I don't know why the diversity of cultures and that kind of thing, it's a lot more heterogeneous than other areas. Maybe that's why, I'm not sure, but it's almost 100% trend. And I remember living in Portland and going outside of Portland a lot because Oregon's such a beautiful state. So spending a lot of time outside of there, and seeing a lot of Republican signs in rural areas and even suburban areas and that kind of thing. You're walking into a bar, seeing Fox News on instead of CNN. You just got sort of like a little bit more than just a subtle measure of the fact that outside of Portland, almost every area was red. And I remember thinking to myself, because elections are determined by majority of populations. That's what democracy is, mob rule, pretty much. The whole state would go blue because of Portland itself. And just because of I remember thinking to myself, like, that really sucks for all these other areas. That's not fair. I never really, in my mind, took it to the point I'm like, I wonder if they should secede. But it definitely occurred to me that that's an issue, that's a problem. That when I moved back here, I thought the same thing about, Southern Illinois and being involved with, libertarians and stuff like that. I have heard of this movement. I didn't know it had a name and a formal organization, New Illinois. I just heard that there was a movement in Southern Illinois to secede from the rest of Illinois.
Yeah, there's actually two organizations. We have the New Illinois organization, one that I'm involved with. That's a nonprofit organization, going everything through the legal books and making sure that everything's up to par as far as following the constitutional process of the. And we're mirroring the image of West Virginia, Kentucky, and those kinds of aspects. Whereas the other group that's going on is Illinois separation, and that's a county-by-county referendum, basically asking the people how do they feel, how the county boards feel, and it basically sends a large message to both Springfield and each county, telling the animosity between the citizens and Springfield and the way they feel their states ran. It really gives a perspective. And if you're a true representative and you're sitting in that seat and you're there to actually represent, you would show that there is a major majority of people when that goes on that referendum and voted in that do see the problem. And this is a situation that if you have a large majority of your people that are willing to break apart from your state, it's something you really should focus on if you're a true representative, so that the people can feel represented. And this is the thing that you actually just hit on that's always bothered me, is because the Constitution was designed to be on that populous number. Nowhere did they see high-rise hotels like in Chicago, 25 stories high, where they can get darn near a representative per block. Back
true.
then, when they wrote that, they were basing it off of, almost, how much population you can get in a square foot or a square acre, and that was a good representation for that time.
Right.
Times have totally changed.
Right.
Never saw anything like that coming, and now you lead into a serious problem where the majority rule of our assembly, almost majority, I think it's like 41% of our assembly actually lives and never been outside of the Chicago city. So you have almost a majority control of your entire state's assembly in one general vicinity that's making rules and regulations that impact rural communities that have never, ever seen any of the problems that they do up there. It's so you get a serious problem of getting into Article 4, Section 4 of misrepresentation of a Republican government, because your voice will never be heard. It will always be silenced by the simple majority that's up there in the Chicago area. And in a state like Illinois, where it's so outrageously numbered, it's 40% to 60% population of the state lives right there in Cook County, one county. And it's unbelievable.
That's crazy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So are the representatives in these respective counties, or districts, I should say, in the South, Central Illinois, not giving voice to these movements at all, or has it ever come up in the General Assembly that you know of?
Yes, it actually has. There was a HR 101, House Resolution 101, that Brad Holbrook had presented to the actual assembly, and one of the pages that I managed on Facebook called Southern Illinois Secession Movement was actually exampled in this House resolution bill to basically break off and create Cook as its own state. Now, since that dawn of that bill was 2 years, it's actually sunsetting, and you only get put a bill out on the House for so long before it dies. The new one is being generated with a little different wording to basically say that Cook is the old Illinois, and the states that are breaking away would be the new Illinois, because we want Cook to stick with the problem that they created. So our Constitution would be completely rewritten in the sense of more of a citizen aspect, more of a representation feel, more of a federal constitution feel, and deriving back from our roots. Now, don't get us wrong, we're not going to rewrite it. There's a lot of it that can stay. The majority of it can stay. But
You're just going to amend it.
Yeah, we know where the problems are, and we want to focus on the things that our assembly is sitting in a lame duck session right now, not even talking about.
Right.
We want to focus on those very problems, the pension problems, this problem, that problem, but at the same time, we want to be economically sound and fair to the citizens that that are victims of the policy agenda of the state and the corruption that is generated, the stealing from all of these budgets. We want to make sure everything stays right, and we do not want the people to lose out, and that's one of the things that is very, very crucial in the talks and in decisions of what we do. And that's why one of the main things we do is focus on the economical impact of this, and if you go from there, it's actually going to lead into the history of why everybody in this state will say, no, it won't work. No, it won't work. Cook generates all the money. Everything in Southern Illinois bleeds off of, it just, okay, there's only one report in the history of Illinois that's ever been done on this very thing. So anybody who has any of this information comes from this one report, because it's the only one that's ever been done. The media caught a headline of it, and they took this report, and it breaks down into 6 sections: Northern Illinois, Northwest, Central, South, Southwest, and so on and so on. So it breaks it down into 6 sections, and each 6 of these 6 sections have a revenue expenditure generator. Well, they picked these 9 bottom counties of Southern Illinois, the least revenue generating counties, and then they compare it to Cook. So they take it by a ratio of in and out, considering a ratio of $1 is $1 to $1 is what you consider a balance.
Right.
Well, so for thinking it like that, you have to look at it like, so Cook gets back 80 cents on the dollar, meaning that 20% goes to the Springfield and stays there, whereas of Southern Illinois in this report takes 286 on the dollar. So $1.86 is actually sucked away from Springfield. Now, first thing you do is, first thing I did when I read this report out of the media, because I never read the report, I just read the headlines, and I'm like, I know math. That don't add up. That's not a balanced ratio. So, of course, I read the report. It's out of the Paul Simon Institute out of Southern Illinois University. It's like, don't have in front of me, paper 53 or 57. It's called The Economics of, Illinois, basically. And in this report, it has the Legislative Research Unit's complete breakdown that they didn't write. The Legislative Research Unit of the Assembly of the State of Illinois did this, and they took the information and broke it down. So what it does is, if you actually take this information and you get away from the biased narrative that they wrote this article and this paper on, and you take all 101 counties and then add them together, and then Cook, it actually comes out to, Cook puts out 9.9 on the dollar, and the rest of the state takes 1.1, meaning that the rest of the state is, basically stealing 10 cents on the dollar from the state, and Cook is actually generating the money. But at the very bottom of this report, and they're very adamant about saying this, there's what's called a 30% equalization factor that could go either way, because they don't include all state-run facilities such as schools, hospitals, prisons, anything that is supplied by the state. But each county represents the revenue or the expenditure of it because they pay out of their county bill. So here, when you take that 30% factor of going either way, Cook is one county. It's completely filled up. It's not going to go looking any better for them. That 30% equalization factor, whenever you take all of these state-run facilities such as schools, hospitals, prisons, is actually going, and you take those state-run facilities equation out of it, that 30% is actually going to go towards the rest of the state, leveling that more at more one-to-one. And if it's true, like how I feel with the actual cost of the state-run facilities, when you look that up, it comes down to more of Chicago is bleeding off the rest of the state with the 101 counties. So there's a lot of misconception in this paper, the way they wrote it and the way the media has responded to it. You know, I mean, think about it. It's like a 45-page paper, and you get one article that's about 3 paragraphs trying to explain the economics of a state separation. You can't do it in one paragraph. It takes a lot of reading and search. But most of the community will see that one article and base their whole opinion off of that because this one article said it. You know, so
you just described a great many things, Paul.
Yeah, I always suggest people to actually do the math, do the reading. Don't take my word for it. You can go on the newillinois.org website, and my figures are all right there, and I've had them, you know, double checked by some of the greatest, you know, financial minds and math minds in the state. You know, so it's definitely there. My numbers are on, and I've actually done speeches, you know, where I've hosted events for the New Illinois organization over in Belleville, Illinois, because Southern Illinois University at Carbondale is close enough, and I actually, you know, put it out there that I would love to invite the authors of this report to come over here and explain this to the people how I'm wrong. They never showed up, of course, but yeah.
No, that's all very interesting, and you just described a great many things and a lot of topics and issues in this country, probably all across the world, is that people hear, especially the news, they gather a couple of points from, like, you know, whatever, 43 pages all the way up to a 1,000-page paper or bill or whatever, and they exploit those points and don't go any further with it. They don't check the math or anything else. And everybody, you know, but the main source of information for most people is the news. So they determine the narrative and the discussion of the country, and in so many ways. And a lot of people don't know what. And I wish the media would be more responsible with their analysis and what they say, merely because, or even if just because, people shouldn't have to spend weeks doing the rigid, deep mathematical analysis to determine if something is right or wrong. Okay, that's what we have people for. That's what we have politicians for. And the media, being accountable to get things right, should have a set of people like, okay, let's look at this 43-page thing and let's analyze it thoroughly, see what's happening and see what's right, and then espouse those things on air to the public. I don't want to. I mean, I'm good at math. I'm educated. I know I studied logic and all sorts of cool things. I don't want to spend all my life, you know, checking every single last, you know, mathematical whatever, so I can vote correctly. I'd like to live my life as well. Anyway, but the point is that that's very interesting. So real quick, everybody, it's the bottom of the hour. You're listening to WRLR 98.3 FM, the voice of Lake County. All right, so Paul, let me ask you this then. And so you're bringing up things. We'll definitely be able to fill 2 hours, no problem, because I got a lot of questions. But let me start with this or go to this like main thing here. This sort of like main opposition to the whole mission and effort of what you're trying to get forward. People are just like, that's crazy, that's nuts. Those days are over. The state boundaries have been established for a long time. The whole notion of secession is antiquated and ridiculous. It's not going to happen, even with good intentions and right purposes. It's still not going to happen. What say you to those people, the naysayers?
Well, the first thing I would say is, one, I believe we started out with 13 and ended up with 50. The last two until 1940s, you know, at the end of 1940s were the last two admitted, which is only about 70 years ago. So this isn't a new thing. Then I will ask the people, do you know anything about, you know, the republic's, you know, is a capitalist nation? So we are essentially, each one of these 50 states are a business. Each one of these has a revenue generation or expenditure generation, and we have to take that into consideration. The more states you have, the more businesses you have. You tell me one owner of any business that has not wanted to expand and grow and create more, have more buildings, have more employees, have this, have that. This right here, this very idea. What if you had two generating types? Chicago's one that's corrupt that exists now, and one that's actually feasible and that could actually take the money and do the right thing with it. Lessen some of the restrictions that the Chicago area land has put on the rest of the state and allow the growth to come back. Make people want to build here. Make people want to live here. Flat rate the property tax. Make it to where there's no guessing anymore. You know what you're coming into. This is unbelievable the way that this whole system is ran, and they constantly sit there and say that they're going to get more people. This is going to be the blue wave that's going to generate this, state into the back into the black and get us out of the red. But no, what has happened is another 70,000 people have left in the last year. This is not going away or getting better, and every single citizen that walk away falls back on us. The ones that are staying, the ones that have to stay, the ones that are left behind. We got family, we got friends, we got our careers here. We don't want to have to keep paying more and more for their inept decisions. That is ridiculous. These guys are the ones that are supposed to represent us, the ones that are supposed to feel for the common man, but what they're doing is they're putting their boot on our neck and they're holding us down, and it can't be that way anymore. They have to answer for their problems, and they are not doing that. And I'll repeat myself over and over again. They are in a session right now, and nobody's addressing any of the problems.
Yeah, no, they are in session right now. I just tried to get a hold of Joyce Mason the other day. I called her office because of something, and the guy said that they are in session. So yes, that is true. Okay, can you speak more directly to at least one analysis was 6 different separated areas: north, south, west, northwest. Was that right? Did you say that?
Yeah.
Okay, can you speak respectively directly to each area and why would northeast want to be its own thing and northwest and that kind of thing?
Well, they don't want to be. It's just the way that this particular paper separated it so they can give a basic cost analysis and kind of break it down to each section. It ain't that nobody has any one particular area that wants it more than others. And then actually in this paper too, they actually did a slight poll from citizens in different parts of these areas on how they're feeling about it. And actually the majority of the people, even in the Cook region, do recognize that the southern state and the rest of the state is actually getting a less of a deal from Cook, that we do feel disenfranchised, and they do see it in the collar counties, they do see it in Cook County, they see it everywhere. So it's not nothing that's not being shown or you can't see. It's very clear and just in the rules and regulations. And if you look at the expenditures and revenues, you can see, you can ask yourself why is a state as geographically as large as Illinois only producing in one area? Because they're making it that way. They've made it this way. There's nothing wrong with Illinois that we have so much square footage of land that can be built for industry or even in the world today, technology, where Illinois is one of the leading nuclear energy technology innovators in the entire country. And with the new Green Deal that they're pushing for, we're going to lose that too. I mean, it's literally taking every generating major accomplishment that we've created in this state since 1818 and turn it around to some sort of agenda that is only losing money. And it's been presented in other states that they're following these rules and these regulations from are all suffering. We keep modeling after suffering, and that's just ridiculous.
Okay, yeah. And, alternative energies is a very interesting topic, specifically tied into what we're talking about today. Because one of my questions was going to be, well, have you heard of anybody like in Northern Illinois or somewhere other than the people who want to secede say, well, we're afraid if that happens, what you're going to do with your area? That you're going to ruin it. You're going to cut down Shawnee Forest, which isn't okay. You're going to establish, you're going to start polluting, and you're going to have no political, economic, or social accountability because you're governing yourselves and you can just do whatever you want. Any pushback like that?
Well, and there's nothing that would go up, especially in any municipality the way it is set up now. Even giant industries that want to move into a municipality usually have to go and try to get a permit or before their boards in the municipality, local regions, and it's voted upon. If the people in these municipalities, localities, counties, townships, whatever, have a beef with this idea, all they got to do is show up to the board meetings, vote it down.
Fair enough.
That's the great thing about the republic is the democratic process to actually have what you want in your area. Take for perfect example, these windmill turbines are going up everywhere. Many people in the southern Illinois, southern east, southwest Illinois are against these things because they're such an eyesore, taking into consideration the beauty of the National Shawnee Forest. You don't want to see a giant fan of the Little Grand Canyon. You don't want to see it.
Right.
So the people have actually made it to where they cannot build these things here. But the policy that is being generated in our Springfield capital will override their wants and their needs.
Right.
They're literally, the people have spoken, said we don't want that. But the Springfield people say we are making money off of it, so we're going to just not listen to you.
Right.
So they'll still keep attacking the same thing, coming up with different solutions. If this bill fails, they'll put the same wording under a different bill with a different header. Mm-hmm. But it's the same thing. They're going to keep tacking, and it never ceases. You cannot take no for an answer.
Yeah, well, no, I agree. So let's when did this movement become formalized in these two nonprofit organizations?
Well,
how old are they? Go ahead, sorry.
The one Illinois separation was started way before a new Illinois organization, I do believe, and that was about 3.5 years ago, I guess. New Illinois separation approached some organizations that I'm in just to give speeches, tell us what they're about. We listened and we're like, yeah, sounds like a great idea, but at the time I was on I would back it, but I'm not going to move for it. And then just learning the process, because when somebody tells me something new, I'd like to learn more about this. So I got involved and started reading on it, and how many times it's happened in America and everything else. And I realized that there's the new Illinois organization that just formed and then contacted our page and got us involved. So I got involved with them about 2 years ago. Now, going back as far as the movement, it's actually been done several times. Back in 1981, it actually passed the state house and it got stalled in the Senate. So it's been going on for a long, long time. The only difference between then and now is the internet, the ability to move information. The people that were doing it on the west side of the state at the time in 1981, the east side of the state never knew. There was no information. It wasn't being broadcast in the media or the newspapers, and nobody even knew what was happening to support it. Now, Illinois separation themselves has got, hundreds of thousands of people following them. We got tens of thousands of people following us, and we have, 20 some odd counties that are ratified into our organization that are in the process of creating county boards in the event of the separation were to actually take place through the assembly. We would have a county board already set in place for the transfer.
That's really interesting, and that answers one of my next questions is how many people are actually involved in this. That's an impressive number, actually. I think there's more people involved in your organization than in Illinois' entire Libertarian Party. But so can you walk us through the constitutional process of how to legitimately secede without going to arms and starting a revolution?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
It's just as simple as Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution. It takes a majority assembly vote, which means just 51%, not 2/3 like most of the big bills that would go through that would, require anything drastic. Congress actually decided that 51% majority is good enough, especially since the original, 4 states have seceded. A lot of that secession and that come up out of the Articles of the Confederation. There was a lot of animosity at times between New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Kentucky, and Virginia. So the Articles of Confederation had already been written, and the new Constitution was being written at the time when Kentucky, New Hampshire, and Maine and Virginia were already talking about splitting. So they was able to write this in the Constitution a simple majority because of the fact that you're basically splitting the state. At the time, the west side of Virginia and the the east side of Virginia were two totally different geographical, religious entities. So they didn't want to make it hard for the state to have what it wants, the people to have what they want, so they just got it onto a majority vote. So it has to go through the Assembly, has to go through the House, has to go through the Senate. The great thing about this, Article 4, Section 3, doesn't mention anything about the executive branch. Once it goes through the House and the Senate, it goes straight to Congress. The governor gets no say in this.
Interesting.
He's the one we're mad at.
Yeah, no, for sure. He's ridiculous.
Not this particular governor, all governors. And this has nothing to do with JB.
No, I understand. It's sort of way. No, it's true. Even though I really can't stand this one. But he made pot legal. That's about the only good thing he did. What about the federal government? Do they have? Is there in the federal constitution? Is there any say in like, hey, sorry, Illinois, you can't do that or anything like that?
No. If it comes up through our House, we make the decision in our Assembly. They just got to vote it through to ratify.
Interesting.
And if it's coming for, and again, this is basic representation. If our state presents us to Congress, they kind of really should be listening to us. That we've got a state that's agreeing to it. There really shouldn't be any holdup at this point. If it is, it's because Congress has an agenda they don't want it to have happen. And that's just horrible.
But Paul, when's the last time a politician actually listened to the people?
Yeah, that's the whole thing about the moral aspect of the Constitution that I have dilemmas with, and not just this, and just everything in general, is the fact that the Constitution was based on a moral group of people that were voted in to do the right thing. That's gotten corrupted. You hope for the best, but you expect the worst.
It's all business lobbyists, big corporations, that kind of thing that have all the money and all the more political economic clout nowadays. I mean,
well, yeah,
the voters don't mean.
I just happened to see a headline of somebody was going to donate $50 million to any of the Republicans that are willing to go against Trump in this objection thing. And I'm like, wow.
Whether they want to or not, yeah.
If you do what I want.
Right. Whether those Republicans want to or not, or should not, is besides the point. It's that like, $1 million, okay, I'll do that.
Exactly. So you're literally. I mean, it's gotten so bad. We are so, I don't know, oblivious to it or accepting of it, that you can literally have a news headline talking about buying your representative or your Congress, and we're all reading it like this is no big deal. I read it and my mind flips. I'm like, what? This is nothing like I remember. I mean, I love history as far as the American Revolution. I don't go too much in the Civil War, and I've read up through parliamentary procedure leading up to the Revolution just to get an idea of some of the people that were, that the revolutionists deal with and the aspect of where they come from. So when I read through the Revolution, I read through the time of the Constitution drawing, and I discover and learn and get a feeling of the original intent of the Constitution, which I always suggest to everybody, if they want to read the Constitution and they have parts of it that they simply just don't understand, to read the Federalist pages. Alexander Hamilton, Madison, and Jay wanted to have the people understand the Constitution, so they put out the Federalist pages in order to break it down into a description in which they can understand it, that the most common farmer, uneducated through schooling, could read and understand their inalienable rights.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good for people to know that the Federalist Papers are out there so that you can understand. I wonder why that doesn't come up more in court cases and political speak a lot, because a lot of people argue over what we see on the news is a lot of arguing over supposed vagueness or
Well, I've got my opinion on that whole lawyer thing.
Well, then there's
based on every court case in America, the Constitution was drawn, and then a court case came up. Either legally on a local level, they handled it themselves because of state sovereignty. But if there was ever a question of constitutional degree, it would go to a Supreme Court or a federal court of some way, and then it would have a ruling. Since then, since 1789, any court case that has came up and gone through and had a ruling or a verdict rendered has been a court case comparison over time. So now you find every single lawyer going into battle in the courts right now with a case comparisons. This case for X versus Y, Z versus A. And that's in this ruling was this on this premise. So we're at the point in history now, or the American toddler years, I call them, only 250 years old, where we've had so many incidents that there's already a ruling been placed on it, and typically judges follow the same ruling so that they can stay within the statute of what they're trying to do. If you get too many verdicts and too many rulings on the same issue, you have redundancy and you have a complication of a disenfranchisement against the citizens when we're supposed to have equality. One citizen's getting 25 years for jaywalking, the other one's getting $5 ticket.
Yeah, right.
So you get, it's the same thing on felony and big court cases, or any court cases that are brought up against the state. You usually have a statute comparison or a case comparison of the verdict rendered in order to say, hey, Your Honor, you can't really think of it like that because this judge already ruled this way, and then that's when it go to your Supreme Court to rule on constitutional, acts, which is why Roe versus Wade and all them are constantly referred to. You can't look at something like Roe versus Wade and refer to anything else because it was the first case that came out in it, and you have to go by the thought process of the Supreme Court at the time ruling on their constitutional value. So pretty much all court cases, all legal cases are going to be based off of, used to be the constitutional value, but now it's just their verdict's been rendered already.
Interesting. Okay. So you mentioned earlier the Civil War. And I'm not going to ask you to talk about it specifically, but I think when a lot of people hear the word secession, that's what they think of automatically is the southern states in the Civil War, and they did it because they wanted to protect their industry of slavery. And so people are going to associate your attempt with, so you want to what if one of these areas wants to reinstitute the legal protection of slavery? You know of Anna, Illinois?
Yeah.
Do you know about Anna, Illinois?
Not so much history. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Do you know what became of the name? Do you know that whole thing?
No.
Okay, so let me describe this to you real quick. Anna, Illinois is a rinky-dink town in southern Illinois. And it was founded by some white settler whose wife's name was Anna. Now, eventually it became a sunset town. A sunset town is a town in which black people, African Americans, were allowed there during the day, but come sunset, you had to leave. So they weren't allowed to be employed there for very much or anything like that. They certainly weren't allowed to live there. And then eventually that town, the word Anna, which is really just the lady's name, became an acronym, like how Chevy, people who prefer Chevrolet over Ford would call Ford Fix or Repair Daily, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Anna stood for Ain't No Blanks Allowed. And it was a huge problem, and it still exists. And I don't know the current stat. I mean, obviously, legally, they can't do that anymore. But I mean, as far as like the culture of the population, I don't know. Where it stands now, if there's a lot of white supremacists or not. I have no clue, so I'm not speaking to that at all. But I think a lot of people, when they hear secession, they fear that places like that be like, whoa, wait a minute, because this just gives you an opportunity, some backwater people, gives them an opportunity to do really nasty things. So we sort of talked about that earlier. You said, well, if you don't like it, show up to your local, political meetings and that kind of thing. But can you speak to it a little bit more politically, legally, and culturally? Like, I mean, what would satisfy people's fears that, look, this probably won't happen because it's a new day and age, whatever else. I mean, can you speak to that at all?
Let me start by clarifying one thing. Secession is not the word we ever use. We use separation or split because secession means that we're trying to break away from the federal Constitution or the United States, and we are not doing that. We're just wanting to add to it.
Fair enough. No. That's a very good point. Thank you.
As far as their worries about something so dramatically or wrong, the federal Constitution already, has the amendments to protect their rights in that situation. And the fact of the matter is that the Constitution that exists now wouldn't allow for anything uncivil like that anyway. Their rights are the exactly what we're shooting for. If there's any discrepancies in the Assembly's legislation or statutes right now that allow for what somebody would deem racism or how do I put this, entitlement one way or the other,
Sure.
that I would love to hear this complaint, how it can be actually physically proved rather than a feeling or
Right.
I mean, we all know racism exists.
Right.
But
Clearly.
if you're going to ask for the government to intrude and write laws for feelings or something, we have to have some sort of basis that is going to cover every single citizen, black, white, yellow, green, purple. It's not
I get you.
anything that you can really. It's hard to write. I mean, I'm not the legislative writer, but as far as what you're asking me, how are they going to feel? As far as is there safety? No, there is no safety concerns. The only thing that we would mostly focus on is the ability to give them more jobs and help them out economically by opening up the chance for them to excel. Take East St. Louis right now. I've lived this area my entire life, 45 years, and I remember my father telling me the booming factory town that it was, the industry it was so thriving. It was beautiful, blah, blah, blah. Well, since then, it's, became what it is, and it's getting no better. It's a situation here that if anybody in the state, in this capital, really wanted to expand, they could rebuild this place. They could give the jobs needed to this metro area that has a 24% unemployment rate in this general vicinity.
Wow.
There is no reason. Why are they not working? Is because they got held back from working. Everybody's not looking for a McDonald's job. There used to be good factory jobs in America, and if we don't bring back the industry, we're never going to have those good jobs anymore. We're based on capitalism and production. I mean, our greatest times were when we were putting out the most.
Yeah, well, of course. All right, so that's an interesting point. Let's talk about 24% unemployment. Oh, that's an insane amount. I think the federal was somewhere around there at the beginning of the pandemic or during the middle. The national, I mean. That's an extraordinary amount. You want it to be, I mean, once you start getting above like literally 7-8%, then there's something really wrong. Blue collar versus white collar. You kept talking about collar counties. I'm assuming you meant white collar counties. Or did you not know that?
Collar counties is surrounding Cook, the ones that are, the surrounding area.
Okay, so you just meant like the metaphor of a collar. Okay. Because I wonder the extent to which our economic system in America and in Europe has grown into this so many white collar jobs that these guys get paid a lot of money to sit at a desk compared to blue collar jobs, which have gone down considerably. I don't have numbers in front of me, but that's you can look it up. That if that has something that somehow white collar jobs are looked on more favorably as a higher level of income, like a more dignified level of income, that blue collar jobs are looked down upon because they're you're getting your hands dirty, you're sweating, you're getting your clothes dirty, whatever. And like you said, like they just industries, some industries just die because they become antiquated and unnecessary. That's fine. Free market. That's how it goes. Sorry, if people don't want it, you're done. Okay. Oftentimes, industries or markets or specific businesses or allotment of businesses concerning the same sort of products and goods and services gets stifled because of political and economic pressures from the government. Over-regulation, ridiculous regulation, and a lot of these things all these things are decided in general assemblies and on the floor by politicians. And to be a politician is to be a white collar worker. Okay, I mean, so I'm wondering, do you have anything to say? Like I've noticed that before. Like I mean, I have my college degrees. I could easily go get a white collar job making $80,000 a year if I wanted to. I don't want to, and I'm not saying that white collar jobs aren't important. But I'm getting real tired of hearing these guys come to the bar after sitting at a cubicle all day saying, "Oh, I'm tired because I worked so hard." No, you didn't. You sat down and did nothing all day. I bartend for a living, and I also do professional horticulture. Come rip out a garden and replace it with me. That's hard work. That kind of thing. So there's a resentment between the two. Can you speak to that at all? I mean, do you think that has that sort of cultural favoritism has anything to do with why these like rural counties? Because rural counties are blue collar counties.
Really?
Okay.
I can sit with white collar people, a bunch of blue collar people, and we can have everyday conversations. We definitely have a connection and ability of stress, the mentality of stress and anxiety that those jobs bring, no matter what job you have, and especially if you're a white collar job with 6-figure salary a year, you're going to have to work your butt off mentally, or put in a lot of hours doing crunching numbers or reading or being whatever you're doing. I don't look down on that. The American needs that. We're a capitalist nation. We need people to move the things that we produce. So I don't have any resentment towards a white collar worker. Me myself, I'm a blue collar worker because of the fact that whenever I got my toys when I was a kid, most kids play with them. I took them apart because I wanted to see how they work. So I knew I was going to be into this kind of field of electricity, and I was always going to be using my hands. I love it. It's what I want to do. It's what I chose. It chose me. So there's definitely not, I don't think, that resentment. Now, getting to the point of what you're asking is why there's so many more, I think that's through indoctrination over generations of going back to when I was a young, and teachers would always yell at the kid, are you wanting to be a ditch digger your whole life?
Right,
is that what you're going to grow up to be? Well, I'm telling you right now, them ditch diggers make about $25 to $30 an hour with full benefits and a pension. So at this point in time, that little innuendos has been inbred into all the people's minds that they got to look for this college degree job where they work in an office in order to succeed. And it's actually mirrored, that particular little stereotype has mirrored into our federal regulations, where the actual funding for shop classes, home economics, anything that would create the normal citizen, the blue collar citizen, to be has been disbanded from our schools. That's the problem. We've actually taken our country and pushed it so hard towards a technological state, and then removed all the industry that builds this technology and created all these brains and minds and IT professionals that where you go to school for IT, you come out and there's 300 people waiting in the line because everybody wants to sit at home or sit on the computer or do their job or work from home or do whatever. And the industry of the blue collar guy is actually hurting right now. We need more people that come out and do it, and we can't explain to them enough that, hey, you can make 6 figures doing this kind of work, but you're not going to get it your first day. You're going to have to put some time into it. You're going to have to work. You're going to stick it out. You're going to have to save your money and be self-sufficient, but that scares people today. We've created such a lazy society that the idea of doing that for 20 or 30 or 50 years can scare a person, especially, when the video game generation just completely growing and growing and growing. The
video game generation, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll keep you.
That started in my time. I was one of the first ones to get a Nintendo. I loved it.
No, I mean, do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I'm 45.
Okay, so I'm 51, so close. I grew up with my Commodore 64 and TI 99.4A, playing on the computers and everything else, but that was super new at the time, so we still played outside a lot. My dad would take me into the garage and teach me how to do stuff. In school, in high school, definitely, there was, even middle school, junior high, there were shop classes, there were automotive classes. I mean, we had a thing in Mundelein High School where you could go and learn how to build a plane. I'm not even kidding. Now, I don't know if those things are still there or not, but they definitely were there back in my day, and you learned a lot of very important things. And I'm definitely, Paul, I'm not one of those guys that goes, oh, those young whippersnappers, they have no idea. They're these guys in those darn rock and roll. I'm not one of those people who looks at the younger generations and goes, losers. You don't even know how easy you have it. But I will say, because of technology, I'll generalize your video game thing. Because of technology, and I think because of the economic affluence that we have here in America, I do see some troublesome amount of younger generations that don't know how to do much. They can't change their own oil. They couldn't. If they got pulled, or if their tire went flat driving, they're screwed. They better have AAA, because otherwise they couldn't change a tire. Come on, and it's just kind of
consolation. I am electrician, and I do at least 4 to 5 calls a week where I reset a breaker.
Well, exactly. You reset a breaker. Come on, dude. I mean, especially with the little flip switch thing compared to the way it used to be. You just, is it orange? Flip it. So, you know, kind of thing. Yeah, so I don't know. I just feel like it's merely a feeling based on very little experience. That we're going to keep going towards this like lazy ass society and go away from people that need to like, you know, learn how to like do things, be independent and do things on their own, because you can just call anybody nowadays and say, hey, come fix this for me. And if you have enough money, which just about every white collar worker does, you're going to do that. Because not only do you have the money, but there's a good chance that you don't have the same sort of work ethic. Not that you don't have a work ethic. Like the knowledge of how to fix things. And the generation... I was talking to my buddy who owns a restaurant, owned it for a long time. He has 4 kids. His kids are wonderful people. But like I brought a drill into his restaurant to do some repairs with him. And I set it on the counter and just playfully, I'm like, hey, and I won't mention the name. I'm like, hey, what is this? Because I knew he would. He's like, and he didn't even know the name, what to call it.
Right.
I'm like, it's a drill. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. It was really pathetic. And like, you know, they have a service to shovel their driveway. I've been to their house. Their driveway isn't that big. I'm like, are you serious? The kids can't get out there and shovel their own driveway? Come on. Anyway, it's the top of the hour, everybody. You're listening to WRLR 98.3 FM, having a lovely chat with Paul Durr. Am I pronouncing that right, by the way? Because it's D-U-U-R.
Yeah.
Just Durr?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I've heard it a couple different ways. I have a cousin that's actually done like those genealogical history things, take us all the way back to Germany to a plot of land with the crest and everything. And
Sweet.
if you go back to like the German pronunciation, it would be a U with the 2 little dots and be like door.
All right, door, yeah.
But,
Girdle.
yeah, I'm American. I'm Durr. Go with it.
How long has your family been in America? Like, when did you guys come over from Germany?
We would have been over early depression, or before pre-depression era. You know, we're back at mid 1800s, I do believe.
Oh, so okay, so no, you wouldn't have known any of your it wasn't your grandparents or anything that came.
Well, on my mom's side, we lost track. She was adopted back in when she was right after 1930s. She was adopted, so we can't have any real trace on her. So it was only my father's side that they was able to trace back. So, and that landed us basically farmers off the boat and stayed that way pretty much until my father.
Interesting. Okay, very interesting. Yeah, I did one of those DNA testing. I don't know how much to trust those things because, first of all, there's this ambiguous definition of what counts as like ethnicity. You know, like my mother and my aunts and uncles are Italian because they literally came from Italy back in 1957, but they're Italian because they came from a country called Italy, right? Okay. I mean, and there's the cultural stuff and everything else too, but. Like I did the test and it said the most I was Italian genetically was all up in northern Italy, and I've been to the house my mother was born at in southern Italy. I'm like, so it was very peculiar. Anyway, but as I'm a
conspiracy theorist too.
They're banking our DNA, guys. They're banking our DNA. It's all over in like Sweden or some shit stuff.
No,
anyway.
I actually think it's pretty fun. Some of the people have a good kick out of that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it is fun. It is fun. But okay, so let me ask you this. I saw a post on you posted on Facebook that you recently left the Libertarian Party. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
I did too, and probably for very different reasons than you did. I think you follow some of my posts. So, I mean, I did post one about that, so I'm guessing you read it. And we will bicker about economic systems later. But how many, are you getting a notion, at least a sense of a distribution of political affiliation concerning these movements to separate? Do you see a lot of Republicans on board? Do you see more Democrats, equal amount, a lot of Libertarians, Green Party people who, is there any sort of categorization of those sort of distributions?
The Republicans are pretty much in favor of it to the degree in the southern Illinois region. Most Republicans up in the northern region are in favor of it. They like the idea, but you'll never see them sponsor the idea because typically campaign contributions come along with what you say. So there'll be some that will, basically say what they say based on how much they were getting paid not to say something.
Right.
There was a sponsor on the bill at one point and no longer was, and when I asked, the response was, "I was told not to."
Oh.
So that was okay. I'm so like, okay, you believe it, but you don't want to sponsor it. That's all right. I'll walk away with that. And
That's so frustrating.
yeah. And so that as far as the Democrats wanting it, I mean, they have to. They're the hardest ones to bring into this because they're so adapt to the way things are with the social welfare state and
Right.
the way things are going. They're afraid of losing any of that, and when that's not exactly what we're trying to do, we'd love to actually talk to them more so that we can explain that it's not a movement for a conservative state. We're not pushing for that. We're trying to push for a free state, an
Right.
equal state,
Right.
based off of the federal government's ideal of a perfect America.
Right.
And nothing more. This has got no political affiliation behind it. This Illinois organization is made up with libertarians, Republicans. There's some Democrats in there, progressives, people who see a need and dream for a new future and the growth of America to continue, and not somebody mythically saying we're done. At some point there was no rule or statute anywhere in the Constitution that stopped growing.
Right. Right.
And right now, if you look at the populace, if you were to do like a map of, the whole entire country based on population, there is 80 to 85% of the land is still untouched.
Right.
Owned by one person. He may own 1,000 miles of square miles, but he's one person living on that land. The population of, the Cook County region, the St. Louis region, and all these metropolitan areas is just so overran, so packed. It's
kind of disgusting, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's just the way it's always been. It's always been for society to navigate closer to the things that they want and need. But it also creates a really, really tense environment.
It's a very tense environment. Again, Chicago has all sorts of problems with crime in big cities. Well, you find most crime in big cities, period. And it may or may not have, it probably has something to do with the fact that everybody's living on top of each other. At least some sort of psychological effect. Okay, so let me ask you this then. Okay, so let's say one day Illinois General Assembly gets together and says, you know what, we're going to go ahead and allow New Illinois' movement to go. We're going to go ahead. Southern Illinois, you do your thing, Northwest, whatever. However you got to separate it. And let's say it happens, okay, like politically, legally, cool. You are now your own state, Southern Illinois. First of all, what would you call yourselves? And secondly, what then? What do you do once it becomes legally allowed? Go ahead.
Yeah, we've actually had polls on it, on our organization, just like fun polls, what we call Lincoln Land, or, the state of Lincoln, or, there's been, just Southern Illinois has been, thrown out there quite a bit of just because, West Virginia, North Dakota, South Dakota, Southern Illinois, just keep it in mind too. I mean, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel or, create some mythological name that's going to, ring out amongst the other 50 states and sound off better. We're just trying to create a new state. So as far as naming goes, we'll leave that up to the people. We don't really care. But the economic part of it is going to take a couple of years. I mean, just because the Assembly is going to agree to it, Congress is going to agree to it, doesn't mean tomorrow we're in a new state. It's going to take a transition of power, transition of, monetary establishment, economic establishment. We're going to have to get it all correct and make sure everything's done right so that it goes smooth. It's not just going to be an overnight thing. The people in the state aren't simply going to be left up the river without a paddle and a constitution.
Right. No, it sounds a lot like Brexit.
The actual implementation, even if the ruling is ratified, the implementation of it may take a long time afterwards to get to the nuts and bolts of it.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a lot like Brexit in England. I mean, they voted on it 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And they just did it a couple weeks ago. And then we'll see what happens after that, the after effect. Is there any concern about an after effect if it does go through? Any sort of negative concerns? Concerns about negative things?
I can't find any negative concerns of it because right now the only thing that is negative is what is happening. And like I said before, the outflow of our populace. That there is nothing that can be done that is any worse than what is going on right now. I mean, even if the state split didn't grow as fast as what we imagined in our head, and it just simply stopped the outflow of people, that's something. That's something right there. I mean, we've already changed it to where we can change the mentality of the people to want to stay and try. The thought of something new and in a better state. What our whole goal is to create the utopian state that the other 50 want to come to, to flee to because of the less taxes, less restrictions, less regulations, and more freedoms, more liberties for the people. It's exactly, we want to create the utopia that the Constitution allowed for us to have. Of course, it's going to have problems. And the design behind what we would do is less corruption, fight it, get it out of there. But if there's any laws to be made, it's regarding the people who write the laws. I think I should, or at least I would, propose legislation towards the actual assembly and assembly members themselves, preventing them from becoming criminals. And if they do, harshest punishments possible. That's the whole thing right now. You've seen it daily in Illinois, headline after headline after headline, and it's ridiculous, and they still get to keep their seats or get reappointed.
Yeah, that's really
it's amazing. It's just amazing. I got no other word for it because I'm left, with my mouth open half the time, like, what just happened?
It's baffling, bewildering, it's off-putting, it's all sorts of you're like just dropping like, are you kidding me? If a citizen did something like that, you'd wail on us. As a government, you'd wail on us judicially. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You have cops beat us or something. But you guys get to get away with it. That's not okay. The government has definitely, established enough parameters around itself to protect itself, as a privileged class, for sure, which is not the way it's supposed to be at all. It's supposed to be, for the people, by the people, of the people. Remember that? Anyway, all right. So how do you guys advertise yourself? Because like I said, I've thought about this thing before, just sort of randomly, but it's like when you just posted this the other day about New Illinois, I was like, oh, wow, there's an actual organization. How do you guys advertise yourselves in order to get more people on board?
Right now, it's mostly through social media. Before pre-Rona, we was actually out doing flyers, having events, setting up, constant events in every single county to where we can get people to come in and listen to our organization and do that. Put out flyers, put out everything we can, mailers. We do phone calls. Like I said, we have over 20 counties that are ratified, and part of the duty of these committees is to help grow, put out articles in our newspapers, and do everything else. The most important thing is, as we're growing along and we are a nonprofit organization and we're new, is the funding. To be able to, more funding that we get through donations, the more PR we can put out. So it's a slow process because we're not asking anybody for anything as far as joining the organization. There's no membership fees or dues or anything like that. This is all voluntary money coming in for people who actually want to see this transpire, and we use it for publicity to get our name out there.
How is there a board? Is there do you guys hold office within the organization? How is it structured internally?
The state board has an executive board that is aside from the county ratification board. Each county has their own little board, chairman, a chair, vice chair, secretary, and everything. Just exactly the way it's set up now. So you have a state board, which would be kind of like what you would consider your state assembly, and then you have your chair, which would be like your governor type thing. It breaks down to Robert's Rules of Orders, parliamentary procedures. So there is a state that oversees the counties, and the counties oversee each other, or the individual municipalities. So there is definitely a rule of order, but there's no ruling. Nobody rules anything. It's all done through proxy votes and meetings. So the state board would have their meeting based on the central committee chapters meetings. We have one meeting a month where all the counties get on the meeting and go over proposal ideas, vote, and then they go back to the executive board to see what the counties want.
Interesting. Okay, and how many counties have actual?
22 counties right now are ratified.
Oh wow!
And that means that they've basically taken the oath and created the chapter. We're recognized by the nonprofit organization as part of the organization, and we're growing. Once we just actually not too long ago in Carthage, Illinois, actually declared our independence in front of the courthouse.
Nice.
And that all that is, and we're actually following the rule of the Declaration of Independence back in 1776. We're kind of following that process where we're doing public announcements on the weekly of these separation, so that back in that day, you know, you didn't have email, Facebook, and all that. You had a guy out there with a bell on the county in the corner going, "Hear ye, hear ye."
Yeah, hawking.
So basically, that's what we're doing now is the public announcement section, and you have to do that for 96 weeks straight. If you want to see a great aspect of what we're doing, you follow New California. They're 2 years ahead of us in what they're doing, and we're actually representation and coming and following their plan. In order to do what we're doing the exact same thing. We got some of the same people involved that we model and ask questions from. So you can actually see a 2-year future of where we're at. And they're at almost 86% of the counties in California are ratified. And
wow.
A lot of the assembly is on board with it too. So
really?
they're getting actually really, really close to splitting California.
Well, that'd be nice. Let's sell it to Southern California. I mean, come on, dude.
Yeah. The thing I have to remind the people is with our organization, it's not a fun organization. You're not going to go there, and we're not going to have balloons and parties. This is the legislative aspect of the entire process. Consider us the first constitutional convention where we wrote the articles of the Constitution and designed them. That's kind of what we're doing, except for we're not in the middle of a war doing it.
Well, well, not a hot war, maybe a cold war.
Right.
Well, that's really interesting. Okay, and so I wanted to, that brings up a question I had earlier. Can you speak to other states besides Illinois and now California? I mean, I was posting this online, texting some friends of mine about it in Oregon, and like, yeah, Oregon has that same sort of thing, and I'm like, I bet you a lot of states do. Because the rural, it's a thing that you would get upset about. Like, stop telling us rural folk how to behave and what we should do and that kind of thing when we have different issues than you do as a big city. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just seen an article the other day that I didn't even know. Like, I think don't quote me on this. Like New Hampshire or something was actually trying to split themselves up again.
It's like an inch. It's like an inch big.
I didn't even know anything about it until I see the YouTube video of them up there declaring their independence. I was like, wow, everybody's on it. I mean, my focus is Illinois, but yeah, looking outside of the spectrum of Illinois and seeing that there's so many disenfranchised states out there that are doing this, it's amazing. Now, the thing that I stress the most about what we're doing is that we're not trying to push this for every single state. This is for Illinois, and the corruption that we have here has gone so fast, so far out of control that we don't see any other solution as to break off the snake's head. So at this point, we're focused on Illinois. Now, you could have another state that has a major metropolitan area. Let's take Indiana. They're generating a great revenue. They're happy all around, 100% top to bottom. They have no need to want to split, so they don't have to. This is just us focusing on our misrepresentation from a Republican government trying to regain our federal constitutional rights.
Interesting. Okay. Now, you said some stuff earlier, and you brought this up as like a primary point to the whole mission, the whole movement, is the corruption in Illinois' state government. Can you speak in more detail to that?
Well, you got the FOID. The FOID for general it's a violation of our Second Amendment rights. You don't pay the government to give you your right back.
I hate
There is no need for that. Between that, you're getting our list of grievances just grows and grows and grows, and I could probably take up another hour of your time with all the grievances. But mostly, we'll stick with the top three of the illegal gun confiscations, the corruption, and the economic disadvantage of the state itself are my top three interests in the whole thing. Now, there's many people with a lot more grievances than I, but those are the ones that I'm mostly focused on.
Would you say those again? I'm sorry.
It'd be the corruption, the disenfranchisement of economical interest, and then simple, the gun laws and the stripping of rights, First Amendment, Second Amendment, any amendment that they're just trying to eradicate for us.
Does any other state have a FOID card type situation? Do you know?
I think there's only like 6 or 7.
It's okay. So again, living in Portland, Oregon is very liberal in the when it comes to gun laws. Meaning, very like just I could walk into a Kmart of sorts out there and be like, I need a gun. They do a quick background check. Boom, there you go. I own lots of guns in Portland. We had a great time going shooting and that sort of thing. I grew up in Illinois. I come back here and I literally applied for my. And first of all, the FOID card thing. You're right, Paul. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's utterly. I don't know how they get away with it, but somehow they do.
Before you get going too far here, let me tell your people an example of how ridiculous it is.
All right.
I cannot walk into a sporting goods store in Illinois as an Illinois resident. I cannot walk into a sporting goods store and buy ammunition without this card.
Right.
My neighbor in the next state don't even have a card. He can walk in and just show his ID. Well, I'm from Missouri. Well, here you go, sir.
Right.
What?
Right. Because each state respects the other state's laws.
Right.
Like if you and I went over into Wisconsin, they would not be legally allowed to sell us ammunition if we didn't have a FOID card.
Right.
But a Wisconsin resident can come over here because they don't have that ridiculousness and buy ammunition.
Right. That tells you right there that little thing. Right, that tells you that your Second Amendment right is no longer.
It speaks tones to a great many things.
You're based on the approval of some higher being that thinks that there's some sort of deity that can offer you your rights. That it's even a question.
Right. Do you know when FOID started in the state?
No, I'm not real sure. I'm not a real big gun guy. I'm just more of a constitutional
guy. Oh, I see. Okay. I am a bit.
Even own a gun.
Well, that's fine. I don't either because I'm not allowed to because I haven't got my FOID card yet. It's ridiculous. Like I said, I had like 6 or 7. I had assault rifles. I had all sorts of cool guns out in Oregon. Never hurt anybody with them. We just used them for shooting, skeet shooting, that kind of thing. Target shooting. It was fun.
I've done a lot of trap shooting,
Yeah. So for sure, I just said the second I get my FOID card, trust me, I'm going to the gun store and buying guns and ammunition. Especially nowadays with all the crap that's going on. I'm like, and so first of all, here's another crappy thing when it comes to FOID and the pandemic. I applied for my FOID card on May 20th of last year. I still haven't gotten it.
And what does their constitution say?
1 month.
It's like 60 or 90 days you're supposed to have it?
I thought it was a month, but whatever. It's a hell of a lot less than it's been. Now, of course, they blame the pandemic, and our state judicial system legislative system is putting all sorts of things on hold, suspending all sorts of rights because of the pandemic, including this FOID card thing. Let's say it's 90 days. Again, it's been a lot longer than that. The whole notion of due process and a speedy trial, which is in the federal constitution, and I'm guessing also the Illinois one, has been completely suspended by the judges because of the pandemic. Because they can't seem to figure out any other way to hold a trial other than to, like, I have a friend of mine who's been accused of certain things. He's been in county jail for a year now without a trial. A year without a trial, merely based on an accusation. And he's probably, knowing the details of it, I mean, I'm not just saying this because he's probably innocent. I mean, it's just a really weird, odd sense of our situation. Anyway, let's say he is or is not, doesn't matter. He has a right to a speedy trial. It's in the, I want to say the F word today.
Exactly.
It's in the Constitution, but like, oh no, he might get a cold, so we're not going to have it. Come on. It's so ridiculous. I very rarely agree with Trump or Pence, but one of the things Pence said that I agreed with, he's like, constitutional rights aren't suspended just because, people are getting sick. It doesn't work that way. Okay.
That was one of the most clear things that was to describe was the nothing trumps the Constitution.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Again, everybody, it's about the bottom of the hour. You listen to WRLR 98.3 FM, the voice of Lake County. You're listening to Reality Radio. I'm David Rich, your host, having a lovely chat with Paul Durr about New Illinois and the separation of different areas of Illinois to become their own states to rid themselves of the shenanigans of Cook County and the General Assembly. And all proper and all legitimate for sure. Now, have you ever had, let me ask you this, okay, so like you and I were both libertarians at one point. Libertarian because it's a very anti-authoritarian, very decentralized notion, both by which I've held on to. Those two aspects of libertarianism I absolutely adore. It's the economic stuff I couldn't handle. Anyway, there was this notion of when it comes to like these movements of like more freedom, you can sometimes attract some people who want their freedom so they can be jerks.
Yeah.
Okay, like some white supremacists are very libertarian in their political dispositions, so that they don't have any legal effects on their white supremacy.
Right.
Right. Okay. Are you finding anybody like that in your mix? These specific anybody like, yeah, that's right, because I'm a jerk and I'm. Go ahead.
You're gonna find your, I guess what you call your anarchist group. And they're loud, they're fun, everybody has a good time and stuff like that. But then there's the ones in there that are actually seriously consider, or trying to, make this happen. Fortunately, the keyboard crusaders are about all they are, and not going to get that anarchy simply just won't work in 100% aspect, although some forms of it I do love.
Oh, as do I. No, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
But the most impressive thing I found about the Libertarian Party was the conglomeration and the collaboration for the same amount of liberty and freedom for all individuals. And I have absolutely no qualms with the Libertarian Party. I love the Libertarian Party. I am a libertarian. I left the party because some of the things that are going on right now, I feel being a part of that party would actually restrain me or hinder me from what I feel is most important right now. And I don't want to tarnish their name with some of the things that I'm going to do or get involved with or push for. I don't want saying, well, he's pushing this for the Libertarian Party, when no, I'm actually just doing this out of my own cognizance and trying to come up with the best solution. So I don't want to interfere or harm or tarnish their name with anything that I've got going as far as my movement or my, protests that they would not be exactly on the same platform with.
I mean,
so
that's
nothing to do with look at it like this way. The LP's got a big circle, and I'm just 1 foot out of it right now. I'm on the other side of the aisle trying to look, or not the other side of the line, trying to go a little further than what their policy or their perception would allow.
Specifically concerning the New Illinois movement, or other things,
no,
or other things.
Concerning other things that are going on with the the censorship and everything else with the internet and all that. It's a lot to say. Really, I don't like the idea of anybody thinking that I'm trying to paint a bad picture of the Libertarian Party, because I would tell people to join the Libertarian Party after watching the Libertarian Party and listen to the Libertarian, preferably the more educated, smart, civil ones, to understand what they're about and see if that's good enough for them. I'll definitely point people in that direction if I feel that they're headed that way. The one thing about the Libertarian Party that I love is you can come in with a thought process and then wake up. You think you're woke, but they'll wake you up more. They'll tell you the things that have been happening over the last 30 or 50 years. They'll tell you they're really educated in foreign policy, war, right, anti-this, anti-that, right, and they will describe it to a T of everything that you need to know. Some of them a little more than you need to know.
For sure. No, I've had a lot of libertarians on my radio show here, and I had Joe Jorgensen on. I had Spike Cohen on a couple times, actually. I just had him on a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, Spike's great.
I love Spike. And you want to talk about what you just described as a libertarian. He is exactly that. Extremely well-read, well-informed, and well-educated on the nasty crap that our government has done over the years, over the decades, and the libertarian pushback on all these things, consistent with libertarianism. Brian Lambrecht, I can go Preston Nelson, I can go yourself on the podcast when we talked to me. I could tell right away you knew what you were talking about. And I learned a lot being a libertarian for however long, a couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
And I still identify as a libertarian. I'm a libertarian socialist, you know that. And again, we'll bicker about this some other time. But there was a Libertarian Socialist Caucus within the Libertarian Party, so I found a home within my home, that kind of thing. And there were a couple people that I was put off by, but literally I think 2 out of the hundreds upon hundreds that I met. They were just kind of ridiculous with their ideologies and just very odd. And one guy didn't like me right away because of my tattoos, because they're very non-Christian, and he was a Christian. And I'm like, well, tough shit. Oops. Anyways.
You'll definitely get a lot of grief from the individualism.
Right. Exactly. I
always tell people you'll find your libertarian that you don't like that'll cuss you out and make you feel really turned off by the party. But I assure you, there's 100 other libertarians that can make you feel good and talk to you with a sensible mindset.
100%. And I will forever enjoy my time in the party. And I'm still, that's why, I don't know if you actually read the post when I decided to go to the Green Party, what I said. I'm like, I love my libertarian friends. I will always I want to continue to be friends with them. And to this day, I was a little concerned that I might lose a couple people as friends. And no, they were like, no, it's fine. We get it. Knowing that I was a libertarian socialist the whole time, they're like, you get it. You found like a more appropriate home for your political beliefs. We get that. But like, do you know Brian Lambrecht?
Yeah.
Yeah, he hooked you and I up for the podcast. That's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're great friends.
This man is extraordinary, and I had him on. He saved my butt last week because I ran about a half hour shy of like in my interview. And he texted me, he's like, I'll come on for the last half hour. I'm like, great. Anyway, he's always had my back. He's always saved my butt. He has hooked me up with so many great people such as yourself. I love Brian and Claire. They're fantastic people. They're good-hearted people. They're good people. The Libertarian Party is definitely something to, I think, admire and to look into if you're trying to find your way out of the duopoly. Please look at the Libertarian Party, and of course, I have to say, look at the Green Party as well. These two parties are extraordinary in their own rights, and I think there's a lot more similarities than people think there are between the two. The Green Party The Green Party is still. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
The thing I find most admirable about the Libertarian Party is because of the fact that their philosophy that it comes into a degree of both left and right mentality to where it's an actual agreement or a compromise. We'll try this crazy new word, compromise, where people from left and right can come together and meet on the things that they find both admirable and agree on them and fight for that particular thing. They still might have their own mindset on other things, and they can go off and fight that thing. The Libertarian Party does not disenfranchise you unless it falls outside of the policy, or platform of theirs.
Right.
And that's fine. If you're going to fight outside of the Libertarian platform, you really shouldn't use the name Libertarian anyway to put any bad name on them in the first place, because that's not what they stand for, and if you're trying to do that, you're really putting a black eye on them. As far as that goes, you won't find a conglomeration of party affiliates that come together to agree. The thing that the Republicans and the Democrats cannot do right now is to agree, or at least compromise, and you have that in the Libertarian Party. You will. You're going to have your right beliefs, you're going to have your left beliefs, and you're going to stick hard by them because that's typically where you come from, and then you go and meet in the middle. It's a great compromise. Me, if I was to describe myself, it would be a libertarian conservative, going back to Ronald Reagan's definition of conservatarian.
Which is what?
That's where I would fall back into. In my philosophy, it doesn't mean I don't care about the social aspect or the welfare state. It just means I have more interest in the economics.
Right. Well, so what was Reagan's definition of conservatarian?
Libertarianism with a conservative twist, more exactly like I described it, just more of an economical philosophy than any other philosophies as far as the individualism or the self-rights. I believe in all those things, but what I'm going to fight for most is a balanced budget.
Okay, interesting, very interesting. Anything you would like to? We got about 15 minutes left here. Anything you'd like to discuss concerning current events or anything like that? I think we covered the new Illinois thing pretty thoroughly, and I appreciate you coming on, Paul, to talk about this. Seriously, as soon as I saw your post, I'm like, interesting. I need to have him on the show, because I've been, like I said, I've been thinking about something like this for a long time, ever since I was in Portland and saw the disparity between the two types of areas, and I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. So I'm glad to hear that this is happening in Illinois. And you're right, by the way, I just want to reiterate something that you said a couple times already. Illinois has lost something like 15 to 17% of its population over the last, I think, 20 years. Don't quote me exactly on the numbers, but it's a huge amount of people in a short amount of time. Most people suspect it's because of our taxes and because they're just tired of the massive amount of regulations that are imposed upon us by the state General Assembly. It's ridiculous. And, what is Pritzker, like I said, the best thing he did is he made pot legal so we could stop putting everybody in jail for petty, stupid crap. mass incarceration in this state, in this country, is a real problem. But besides that, I don't know. But he raised taxes on gasoline, and who needs gasoline? Who gets affected by that the most? Poor people.
Right.
Why? Because poor people need gas too. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
when you tax the most basic structures of our environment, the things that everybody uses, cables, phones, we have the highest cell phone tax in the entire nation in Illinois.
I didn't know
Most
that.
people don't know that.
I didn't know that.
We have one of the highest gas taxes in the union.
Yeah, that I know.
These are all terrible, terrible things, and they all affect. I mean, who do you know that don't drive a car? Who do you know that don't have a cell phone?
Right.
We are literally generating the revenue that should be putting us in gold country.
We should all have the best of everything in Illinois.
Exactly. Where's my Porsche at? Why am I just this ain't working.
Right, yeah, it's really quite crazy, and you're right, a lot of it has to do with the corruption. So, like, if you don't mind, again, we have like about 10, 15 minutes left. Can we talk about some of the things? Like, I know Madigan is getting some bad press in the last couple of days because of the General Assembly. Do you know exactly what's going on there?
Well, as of right now, he's not going to receive the votes he needs, so he's done the craziest thing. And I love the fact that not too many people are comparing this to Trump losing and crying about it. Not accepting the loss, and everybody's just so mad they ban him off Twitter. Now, if you think about this, Madigan is not going to win because he's not going to get the votes, so he suspends a campaign until somebody else can come along, and if nobody else comes along, he remains the seat. That's kind of weird.
Wait.
To me, if you suspend your campaign, you're done. You're out.
Yeah, it's over.
Suspend my campaign and hope to win still.
No, that'd be so.
So it's a situation that in Illinois, people don't even want to step up against him. I mean, his power is so strong, and that's the other thing is even if he does lose, are you replacing the demon with the devil? The power is still in that seat. You might take the man away, but the power still exists, and he's built that thing up like a throne for kings. And it's a scary scene in Illinois that other assemblies everywhere in the country don't have the power that the Speaker of Illinois has.
Well, so now, speaking of speakers, one of the things that people should keep in mind as far as like the distribution of power on the federal level, Speaker of the House is an extremely important and powerful position. So I'm guessing so in states as well, at least generally speaking. I don't know, it's state to state, like you're talking about. Because they set the agenda for the entire Congress.
Exactly.
Whatever they decide, go ahead.
Yeah, if you go back into the founders' writings and anything that they described into the way the power was distributed across the three equal branches, the House was always the most important one because that's the one that dictates the legislation that affects the people.
Right.
The Senate was more of the state affairs. The people are the ones that are affected by the House's decisions typically, and they host the most populace of the assembly in the fact of representation. So they control pretty much what happens throughout there. So when you have the power, that much power in the House, and you have the Speaker position for 30 plus years, you've created kingdom. That's
because it's no longer right. Because it's no longer specifically Illinois' agenda; it's Madigan's agenda.
Yeah, he's the only. Illinois has the rules where he actually controls what comes in and out of the Rules Committee. That's a terrible thing. Take this lame duck section. He popped down 100 bills in a lame duck section that has been sitting there for a long, long time, and a lot of them have been sitting there with just amended words like "and" to "but." Shell bill this is how that gun confiscation up in Lake County, I can't remember her name, got by with a recycling bill and kept the header but gutted the body to gun confiscation. How do you and if you're going through the assembly, 90% of the people probably don't read all the bills, I'm guessing, because we're in the situation we're in now, that this fact that they sat there and they set down a piece of paper in front of them said recycling bill. Which one of the assembly members is going to say, no, I don't want to recycle? That'll look terrible in the headlines. They sign it, say, yeah, pass it on, goes to the governor. He signs it. Next thing you know, they're confiscating rifles.
Jesus.
That's what happens in Illinois. In my new Illinois, a bill, a vote. You're not going to shell bill. You're not going to combine the omnibus bills. Remember, omnibus bills are a big thing. This one that we're all mad about now in the federal government, omnibus bills didn't come around until the 50s. They just decided it was better and quicker for Congress to, load up all these bills into one and vote on them.
Explain omnibus bills to people.
Omnibus bills are what, if you look up it's a Latin proverb for everything.
Right.
It means an everything bill. It covers all your allocations and activated funding. It's a budget for the United States of America is what it is.
Okay.
And it covers all the expenses that you have to have, roads, schools, blah, 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 defense, everything. And it's such a big bill, 5,000 pages, nobody knows what's in it. Here's the kicker, is we all know what's in it now. Because of this omnibus bill came out, and all this stuff going on, all these crazy spending, such as lizards with, treadmills or something, people know it. The people see this, and it is still passed. Nobody called the representatives to stop this thing, to amend it, to question why is so much foreign aid going off to another nation when we're dying for stimulus here.
Right.
It's because they outshine the people's vision with $2,000 check.
Sure. It's almost a payoff.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that I'm saying that people don't legitimately need the money in the pandemic.
Oh, yes,
I'm
people
not.
do legitimately need it.
Yes, no, for sure. I mean, because by the way, remember, like when the government shuts down your job, your workplace, your industry, it's up to them to supplement you. I'm sorry. I mean, that's. Some libertarians wouldn't agree with that, but I think most would say that.
Libertarians saw the last shutdown of 85,000 people of federal employees out of work as 85,000 people that'd be doing great right now in a private industry.
Well, fair enough, and that's probably true. But I'm saying when the government forces you out of your job, then it's their responsibility to supplement your income. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, I don't think
that's exactly what this comes down to is the fact that this is a forced shutdown. They've closed the doors. They're putting the detrimental strain on each of one of the businesses here. And was it just the other day, JB come out with a new headline and article, that the federal funding for the small businesses probably not going to happen.
Oh my, really? I didn't see that.
That's a big deal. Now
that's a huge deal.
These guys are hurting. And our governor is telling them you're not going to get the health you deserve.
Jesus, I can't stand him. He's such a jerk. I stood about 4 feet away from him at the Lake County Fairground when he was campaigning. I should have said something then. Anyway, okay. Well, I wanted to ask you about what was the lady you and I talked a little bit back and forth on Facebook about it. Who made the Hitler comment? Who's backpedaled since then? What's her name?
Well, do what now?
She said something favorably how Hitler was right about the kids. Isn't that you?
No, I don't think so.
Some Republican in Illinois said Hitler was right. You have the youth, you have whatever.
Oh, Mary Miller, who just got elected to Congress, had made a quotation from apparently. Come to find out, only Hitler made this quotation, and he's the only one allowed to use these particular words in life for the rest of his life. She made a quotation that Hitler made, and it's an observation. Just because an evil person doesn't mean he's not wrong, and that if you can indoctrinate the youth, you can control the nation. Right. So basically, if you can teach the children a certain aspect of, let's say, just I hate to say the word to cause any disruption, liberalism, and you make it of your school, but you're going to end up with in a nation in 10, 20 years. You know what I mean? So it really does affect that way, and Hitler proved that point. He said it. She basically warned us, and that's exactly what she did. She warned the people, and the only symbol that she could use was probably the worst one that you could have picked, but it doesn't make the quote any less true.
You're right.
And the fact that we are calling the like Tammy Duckworth and everybody are calling her to resign and do all this stuff. Come on, we're hurt over that, really.
Right.
I mean, this is what kind of nation have we created? We're so wimpy that words are just sticks and stones break my bones type thing, I mean, we're in the elementary school tactics for revenge.
Right. No, I agree. I think the reaction is over exaggerated towards her, against her. Chairman Mao, who was also a homicidal maniac, did the same thing in his 5 or 7 year plan that he had to rebuild China. He made a major campaign to indoctrinate children into the belief in communism. and that kind of thing. And so, I mean, you're right. I mean, you're breeding the next generation to think in certain ways. That's what education does. You don't want education to be indoctrination. That's, I think, the biggest problem with that. Is you want education to create free thinking and the free flow of ideas, so that the better ideas can come to light eventually.
I've always heard the quote that if you never knew the religion or the political affiliation of your teacher, you've got a good teacher.
There you go. Exactly. 100%. Awesome. You and I posted on this about what this lady said. I said, okay, I understand. I do not believe that she should resign, that she be forced to resign or be removed at all. I get it. I'm sure that she is a lovely lady who's not a neo-Nazi by any stretch of the imagination. But then I said to you, I'm like, but why was Hitler her go-to guy concerning the sentiment of we need to attract ourselves to, or get the children attracted or into our way of thinking or whatever? Nobody else no better person has ever said something similar.
Yeah, that's the only problem is, like I said, I can't get into her mind. Maybe she, psychologically, maybe she just heard the quote or just seen a movie.
Sure. It was the freshest thing, right?
Yeah, it could have just been there. It's so to try to evaluate the psychology of why somebody says something doesn't really pertain to anything evil, especially when everybody that I've argued with about this who thinks she should be strung up and hung, because that's so much more nicer than her saying true, is the fact that it is a true quote and nobody has been able to deny it whatsoever.
Yeah, no. Okay, so and you're right. So okay, studying philosophy, we study critical thinking and logic a lot, with the logic of arguments and that kind of thing. And included in that is a very long list of what are called logical fallacies. There's a whole bunch of them. Straw man, red herrings, circular reasoning, blah, blah, blah. Well, one body of them, it's called ad hominems. Ad hominem abusive, and what we're referring to right now is called ad hominem circumstantial. The first rule in logic, or in philosophy, literally the first day of my first philosophy class, the teacher said, always separate the reason from the reasoner. It's the argument that you want to attack, not the person saying it. Now, that's true 99.9% of the time. Sometimes the person saying it is relevant to what's being said. But the point is that let's say she never said Hitler in the first place and just quoted him ambiguously, anonymously. Nobody would have had a problem. Are you there?
Exactly.
Nobody would have had a problem with it until some news guy found out that it was Hitler, and he was like, oh my God, she quoted Hitler. The fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter who says it, it just has to be true.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay, but at the same time, Paul, I gotta say, as a politician, she should probably watch her. You're in the public eye. You got to expect some sort of backlash when you do things like that. Does that make sense?
Oh, most definitely.
Okay.
The only defense I got for her on that particular issue is like her third day on job.
There's a learning curve.
You got to give her, she's green, give her a little way,
Right. Well, I hope she doesn't get removed. I hope she doesn't, get forced to resign or anything like that, because it's pretty. You're right. It's much ado about nothing. Let's move on. I'd like to know more about her political beliefs and stances and that kind of thing.
Shame her on her decisions, on her vote, on her policy, and her proposal. Don't shame her because she said something that was true.
Right. All right, sir. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a great time talking with you, and I look forward to keeping up with your posts on Facebook. Always enjoy reading them, and I'm sure I'll probably have you on my show again. And let me know, by the way, you have my cell number. Let me know if there's any sort of substantial progressions in the New Illinois movement. Okay.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, you can call me anytime. I'm always ready for a rant. You got an hour to fill. I got 3 hours to talk. So.
Sounds beautiful. All right, Mr. Durr, you have a good evening, sir, and I will be in touch.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye. All right, everybody, Paul Durr. Fantastic conversation. Thank you very much. We'll be right back to Reality Radio.
You're listening to 98.3 FM, WRLR-LP, Round Lake, Illinois.
Families affected by disasters urgently need
And we're done.
Helping America.